Hello. How's it going? So I think there's some of you already watching. So type in the box. Let me know who's here. I think I've adjusted some of the settings as well. So I think it's easier to comment now. I think some people have had some problems, but hopefully that's fixed. So we just we'll wait till 11 o'clock and see who shows up. Hopefully you can all hear me fairly well. The microphone hopefully is working okay. And we'll be there in a minute. Okay. So if you can type a message, feel free to. If you can. If you can't, then well, I don't know why that is. Okay. Okay, so it's nearly 11 o'clock, so we're going to begin with we'll begin with the Lord's Prayer. We'll just wait till we begin on time. Give everybody a chance to be here. So I think we're about time. So let's pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. So today, I said that we're going to talk about icons. Now, the first thing I'd like to say is the picture that I used to advertise this is an icon of the Trinity, and it's morning, Liz. It's an adaptation of Rubelev's famous icon, and it was done by a guy called Peter Murphy, who is a friend of mine. He's one of the, if not the, well, certainly one of the most famous contemporary iconographers, certainly in Britain, but he's pretty well known. If you want to see his work, you don't have to go, morning Anna, you don't have to go much further than Hereford Cathedral. If you go and see all there's a pillar with the icons of St. Ethelbert with the blue. He did that. The shrine of St. Thomas, which is very vivid, blue, red. He did that. The cross that they carry into worship at the cathedral is made by Peter. There's also an icon in the north transept that he's done. and his work is all over Hereford Cathedral. If you get into icons, you come across Peter pretty quick, and I could have bought that icon off him, but I didn't have £1,500 to spare. But that, to be honest, it was a bit of a bargain. And it's an amazing icon. If you've seen Peter's stuff, is very vivid and rich. And anyway, let's begin at the beginning. So, where to start, really? I think the place to start is probably on a personal note. So, the thing that really got me into icons was something that happened while I was still training for ordination. We went to this retreat, and I think it was at a place called Langasti, and I'm pretty sure, I think it was there. And there's an icon of the Transfiguration, which is in the corner of the chapel. And when I was training, you had to go away for these weekends, which actually most of us kind of resented. Because, especially me in a way, because I've been working all week, and the last thing I didn't want to do was be away from the family at the weekend. But it was kind of part of the training, so you couldn't not go. But I remember, and this particular weekend was a silent retreat, which I'd never been on. And as you may think, not my natural comfort zone. So it was a weekend away. It was a weekend retreat, but worse than that, it was silent retreat. So I didn't really look forward to it. So we went, and as usual, we met in the chapel when we had a cup of tea and stuff, and then we went into the chapel, and we went into the silent retreat. And I remember sitting there looking at this. I remember thinking, I don't really want to be here. I didn't want to be there. Anyway, by then we'd entered into the silence. So there was no one to complain to if you wanted to, only yourself. And the following day, we got up and went into the chapel, gathered for a prayer. And Elizabeth, who was leading it, had there was a Franciscan nun, and she began. She was sort of helping Elizabeth in sort of the morning meditation. Anyway, cut a long story short, meditation began. I remember sitting there thinking, still not really keen on being there. And looking at this icon, something happened. Now, when I say something happened, when I talk about religious experience, the one thing I think the key thing about religious experience is the thing that it's not so much about what you see, it's not so much about what you hear, and it's not so much about the environment. It's about how you react to it. And I remember this kind of feeling of kind of just being floored. And I kind of, during the meditation, I lay down on the floor. And I remember afterwards, the nun said to me, "Oh, I was very impressed with you lying down on the floor, And what she meant was, it was an act of devotion. What she didn't know is actually I kind of had to be on the floor because, I kind of felt floored by this experience. Anyway, cut a long story short, it kind of opened me up to the way in which God can use things to communicate himself. Okay. Now, what you've got to remember is at this point, I'm a very, very low church, very, very low church, charismatic evangelical. Okay. So the charismatic bit was kind of there, but the idea of images and of all that kind of stuff, not for me. And I think this was the kind of moment where I understood, Irish, I understood that actually it was a bit broader than that. So that's the thing. So that's the kind of spiritual context of my introduction to images. And years later, I became interested in making icons. So what I used to do is I used to buy posters, and I used to put them on boards, do a bit of gilding around the edges, and so forth. So that kind of thing. And I used to display them in the church in different seasons and all that sort of stuff. And then I thought to myself, well, I wonder if I could actually, make a proper icon. You've all seen this one. This is just the one that I keep around the office. And this is the kind of prototype of the one which is in St. Mary's Church, Berwick-Hill. Okay. So this is the pre one. Okay. There's lots of icons that I have made. Some I've given to friends, one of which of mine is in Dore Abbey. So if you're ever in Dore Abbey, there's a big one there that I made, and it's there. There's a few at St. Martin's, which I've made. And I kind of try and leave them wherever I go. Now, so let's just talk about how I got into icons. So I got into icons and started learning how to paint and all that kind of stuff. Now, the book that I bought is this. And if you want to try your hand at icons, this is the book to get. It's by Aidan Hart, lives in Shropshire. And this is the book that will tell you everything you need to know about how to make icons. Okay. As you can see, I've kind of worn mine out. So I bought a book and started to try my hand at making icons. It costs quite a bit of money because you've got to buy all your equipment. The paintbrushes are fabulously expensive. Well, I would say you could borrow mine, but it'll probably fall apart. It's about, I think I got it for about 40 quid. I don't know Aidan. I've talked to him, emails and stuff, but I've never met him. Lives in Shropshire, does lots of courses. Yeah, so anyway, the paintbrushes. So I've got some stuff. So these are the kind of brushes that you buy. I can't remember where I get them from though, but they're very expensive. They're there's a particular kind of squirrel hair that they're made from. They're not cheap. So these are some of the ones I keep. So you can get in various different lengths, although I don't tend to use the long ones that much. And as you can see, they are clean. This one's slightly different. This one is pure squirrel, whereas the other ones are are different. The ones that are pure squirrel tend to hold a bit more water. Peter Murphy uses these a lot. Okay, so I had to buy the stuff. There's quite a lot of stuff to buy. And one of the things I'll show you is this. This is my burnishing tool. Okay, it's got an agate stone. I think that's how you pronounce it, agate stone. And as you can see, it's got bits of gold on mine. And this is what you would use to burnish the icon. I should do a workshop. In fact, I will do a workshop because as of this week, next week, I will almost certainly finish my PhD completely. And so I will be looking to take up some of the old hobbies that I've had to put down for that. So I could do a workshop. The only thing I mean, I've got lots of boards. I've got all sorts of stuff lying around. Anyway, so I've had to buy myself all sorts of stuff. I'll show you this. This is quite important. This is a pad. And this is, you put your gold leaf on there. And you take your knife. And you get yourself one of these. And you cut your gold. And you use this to cut your gold. Laying gold is not easy. Let's have a look. So, and you would use something like this. This is, I don't know where my big ones are. You can see the gold still on it. Little brushes. So you put your gold on the pad, and you would just brush. Just gets the oil off your skin, and then pick the gold up. You would wet the board and then place the gold down. Sounds easy. It's not. It's incredibly stressful. So I basically, I no, you don't have to shave your head. It's incredibly difficult, really, and it takes a good it takes ages to make them. So what you would do, you would get yourself a board. So this is a good illustration. This would be a board. You get yourself a board, and on the board, I've made these from scratch. So you get your board, and on the board you would layer it with what they call gesso. Now it's basically sort of like chalk and glue, and it's rabbit skin glue. You might say, well, why rabbit skin glue? Because one of the important things about an icon is that you don't use anything artificial. It all has to be natural, and there's a theological reason for that. And I'll get into the theology of icons in a minute. So you would mix this like paste together with rabbit skin glue. You have to warm it up in a double boiler and all sorts of stuff. And if you get it too hot, it ruins the glue. So you've got to have a temperature control. Okay. So it's all quite finicky. And you would mix this powder in and you paint the gesso on. And you wait for it to dry. Not completely, but until it's lost most of its moisture. So when you look at it, you'd see that it's lost its sheen. Then you can put another layer on. So when I used to so the icon that is in St. Mary's Church, that took me 14 hours to gesso. So I started at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I kept going and going and going and going. Now, they normally say that you put about 8 layers of gesso, but I always put much more on because I just keep going and going and going and going because you sand it down. So I would lay the gesso, I would leave it to dry a day. So layer, 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 leave it to dry a day. And then I would sand it down. So I would sand it down and I would start off with something like 80 grit sandpaper and progressively get finer and finer and finer and finer. So eventually I used to end up on about 1,000. And so in the end, you would polish the gesso. So it was absolutely flat and clean. Now, if you didn't do the sanding bit right, every flaw that you leave in the gesso will show up in the gold because it'll catch the light. So to sand an icon board takes a long time, a couple of days. And I used to have a little light go in at night and shine the light, and it would show you all the little imperfections, and you spend ages getting it perfect. Okay, so once you've done that part, you've got a board now to paint on. So once you've done that part, the next thing would be to apply an image that you've drawn, and they're normally like so you get a pattern, but you would sort of adapt it. I have got some stuff. I don't know whether hang on, I don't know whether I can let's have a look. So let me see if I can paste. No, I can't. No. Anyway, so you draw your image on the icon board. Okay, so in this case, okay, you draw around, and then you would inscribe it around. And once you've done that, then the next phase would be to put the clay, what they call the clay bowl. Now, you have to buy this bowl, and it's like a very, very fine, I think the stuff that I use is called Lefreg or something like that. You have to acquire all this stuff from all these different sort of sources. But you get this this like clay bowl, and you mix it with rabbit skin glue again, and you go through the same process. So you mark out where you're going to gild, and then you apply your bowl, and then you wait for it to dry. Same sort of process is with the gesso. And then you've got to sand the bowl down. However, there are different methods for this. Aidan Hart uses a method where you put it down and sand it down again. Peter Murphy has actually got a little bit more. I think he's got a slightly better system where you make the clay bowl very thin and you pool it so it naturally finds a level. And you don't have to put so much on it either. So you do that. Once you've done that, you let it dry, and then you're ready to lay your gold leaf. Now, the gold leaf, the place where I get my gold leaf from is a place in Birmingham. I can't remember the name of it now. It's all been such a long time ago. I think so. It works out at about £11 for 25 sheets. You can't use 24 karat gold. It's too pure. But I always use 23.5. Okay. Extra thick. Now, gold comes in two forms. It comes in a transfer. So it's like stuck on a transfer. Don't use that. You can use that. But or loose leaf. I always use loose leaf. So what you would do then is, and there are different methods for this, but this is the short story. You would get a large squirrel brush with some water, distilled water. Yeah, distilled. So whenever you use an icon, you always use distilled water because the minerals in the water can affect the pigments and things. So you use distilled water. it's not really a good idea to use deionized water. I can't remember why, but it's, yeah. But what I used to do, I used to use the water out of the tumble dryer. Same thing. And so you put some water in, and you put a little bit of glue in, mix it, and you wet the icon on the part where the clay bowl is. You wet it, and it leaves a pool along the top. And once you've done that, you take your gold leaf with your brush, you pick it up, and you place it on the water, and it'll just snatch it. Now, there's a great art to this, because if you get it wrong and you don't lay it down flat, it'll tear the gold. So this is probably one of the trickiest things about making icons, is about the gold work. After a while, a couple of years, you get really good at it. Okay, so you put the gold, and it'll snatch. What happens is the water slowly seeps into the clay, and it draws the gold onto the clay. And you repeat the process all the way around. So until you've gilded all of the area that you want to be gilded. Okay. Okay, so you do that. And once you've done that, then you need to wait until it's ready to burnish. So you get your agate stone and you would tap it. And there's a certain tone that tells you when it's ready. Okay? So if I tap this, see, it's very sharp, the noise. When you tap it, when it's ready, it will be a softer tone. So there'll be a tone. And that is when you know it's ready. So what you would normally do is you would lay the gold down and you would leave it for an hour. The best, also, there are other things to bear in mind. The best day on which to gild is about 20 degrees and cloudy. If it's too warm, it'll dry out too quick, and you'll end up with very patchy areas where some are dry and some are too hard. So you have to pick your days. In places like Italy and Spain, the Middle East, they would do most of their gilding in the winter, and then they would paint all summer. So they would do the gilding part at a different time that they're going to paint the icon. Okay. Anyway, so once you've laid your gold, you've waited an hour, and it's right, you get your burnishing stone, and you would press it on, and you work it back and forwards. Not pressing too hard, just the weight of the stone to start with, and progressively you can get heavier and heavier and heavier. And so you would work your way around the board until it's all burnished. Now, to burnish just means to make brown, to make dark. So if you look at no, that's burnished, but if you look at unburnished, it's got like a matte finish. But if you look at the icon in the church, it's got a very sort of deep luster, and that's from burnishing. So you burnish the gold. Before you do burnish, though, there's always slight cracks and amendments you have to make. So Aidan Hart describes gilding an icon as purgatory, because it's like facing a judgment to which you don't know what the result's going to be until you finish. So it is a bit of a nerve-wracking. So gilding day is nerve-wracking day, because it's the day it can all go wrong. And even if you're really good at it, there's no guarantee that it's still going to work well. It's a stressful day. Aidan Hart says you use vodka in the water. Oh, that's another thing. Use vodka or gin in the water. A little bit of gin, a little bit of water. That just helps the absorption. And he says that after you've gilded, whatever's left over of the gin and vodka, drink it. Because it is, stressful. So it'll take you all day. And if it's a big icon, you may even be able to gild to burnish the next day. The reason for that is because once you've laid down your first lot of burnished gold, what you would do then is go over it again. So you go over it again. So this time you don't use any glue, you just use water, a little bit of water with your brush, put the gold on top, and you go all the way around. And then you wait for it to dry and you burnish it again. The one in the church has got 3 or 4 layers. So if you look at it, the gold is really quite sort of lustrous. I think that's the word. There's a deep hue to it because it's got quite a lot of layers. And the more gold you can get on, the better it looks. But after about a day, you can. So once you've burnished the first lot of gold, you're kind of good to go for other layers. So that one in church took me a day and a half from start to finish. So that'd be 8 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night. And then I started again at 8 o'clock in the morning and they finished at midday. So that's how long it took me to burnish that icon. And that's just the burnishing. Okay. There are other ones. So this is probably the most used one. Still got bits of gold on. This is the one I use. And you sort of use it, you get into a sort of groove on it really. And you put the board at an angle so you can see where you've rubbed, where the color has changed. So you can kind of see exactly where you've been. And these are, by the way, if you drop these, you have to throw them away, because if it splits on you while you're burnishing, you've ruined your icon. Okay, so once you've burnished the icon, you have the opportunity then to sort of pretty it up, in the sense that you can add kind of things in the halos and stuff like that. So you can put indentations. So if you can see there, I've got little indentations that I've put in the halo. Yeah. Yeah. Do you see that? And the light catches those indentations. So that's a pretty simple one I've used there. So what you would use then, you can get yourself a kit of these, or you can make them. A lot of people make them. And you can draw a pattern, and you would just place those on the icon, tap with a hammer, tap, tap. That took me a day. So you would I drew the image kind of, and then you can do the sort of the indentations and stuff. I can't remember the proper name for it. It's in the book. Now, there's a bit of a hoo-ha about this, because in the Eastern Church they don't do that. They see that as too decadent. It's only in the West that you find those sort of beautiful indentations and stuff, patterns made in halos and stuff. So you find it most in the West. You don't find it in the East. The Orthodox Christians don't like it. So there you go. Sugar crab, well, they might well be, but that's what we all use. So and you just get your little hammer, and so when you see the one in church, that's what's happened. So that took me probably another day, and you've got to do it quite closely after you've burnished. So the gesso and the bowl underneath is still a little bit soft. Once it goes hard, you can do nothing more. It's done. Okay, so that's the gold part of it done. So that's phase 1. Phase 2 is then what you would do is you would overlay your image of the sketches. Yeah. You find them, you find them more in Italy. You find them a lot, but you don't find them so much in the East. Anyway, you sketch your image onto the gesso that you're going to paint, and some people inscribe them. So there we go. That's what I use. It's not an inscribing tool, but it does me. It's a little inscriber, so I sort of work through. The other thing to remember is whenever you touch the board, it's always good to put gloves on or something, because the oil from your skin will get on the gesso board and it can interfere with the paint. So you would inscribe. The next thing to do would be to start painting. Now, there are 2 methods for making icons. The first method is the most popular. It's called the prosopon technique, and it comes from the Greek word pros, which means face. It also means towards, but it kind of implies face. So and you find that in the first passage of John's Gospel, proston theon. So what that means is that the word was towards God. Yeah, word was with God, as that's often translated, but actually it's a little bit more nuanced than that. And what it means is the word gazes upon the face of God. So so there's the idea of face there. So that's the prosopon technique. And the prosopon technique would be that you draw out the outlines of the face, and you put then your skin colors down. So I would normally so what did I use? There's a mixture of, I use a mixture of 2 different ones. One is which is burnt ochre, and I can't remember this. I can't remember. There's another color I use, and you mix together, and you lay that down, and then you sort of draw out your image, and slowly the image is drawn out of the darkness. So you start with dark, and you draw the image out. And normally the what I use a lot of would be yellow ochre. I think that's how I pronounce it. Ochre. Yeah, I think that's it. So you use a lot of that, and so you draw out the light. So you start with a dark surface, and you draw out. So it's all about the light, and what the spiritual exercise of that is you're revealing the face of the icon. Okay, so the idea is that the face is there, and you're using light to illuminate, which is why you always get that feeling, not so much on these, but you always get that feeling that there's a kind of cast of light, so you can see the light shining, revealing the face. So you're kind of applying the light that sort of draws the face. That's the first technique. That's probably the most popular one. The second one is one called a membrane technique, which is you form the image more fully, and you layer. So you put layers down, and burnt umber. That's the one. Burnt umber. Yeah. I say I can remember where I got it. I've got all my paints in a box in the shed, and because they're all dry powders, you see, and I'll explain that in a minute. And I I think I got a lot of them from a place called Cornelison's. Do you know that one, Gin? In London. And there's also a place in Italy, in Venice. I think I got some. When you're into it, you sort of build up a sort of network of supplies where you get all this, and also you build up a chain of communication. So people like Peter Murphy, if you email them, they'll tell you where you get this and where you get that, and so there's that sort of stuff. I can't tell you how much money I've spent on pigments. It's unbelievable. Anyway, so you draw your image. So that's the membrane technique is a slightly different technique. Aidan Hart uses a lot of the membrane technique. I won't bore you too much about this. So once you've painted your image, so then you have your gilding and you have your image. Traditionally, what you would do in Russia is they would cover it in oil and bless it. But artists, icon writers hate that because you can do no conservation on it afterwards. So you would use normally a more modern varnish that you can remove afterwards. I will do a workshop on icons, but there's an awful lot of stuff to sort of get together, really. But I will have a lot more time coming around. Okay, so once you've done that, the other thing you can do is you have to name the icon. Okay, so here you have Jesus Christ, and here's for Mary. If you notice that Jesus is the only one that has this kind of halo, and in art you will only see Jesus with that, and it symbolizes divinity. The other thing that you can do is you can put gold on the garments. Yeah. And what that does is it gives it a kind of, it gives the impression that the image emerges out of the gold. You get that kind of, the continuity. And it also, the theological reason for that is it displays divinity. Okay, that's the idea. Okay, so why did I get into icons? So the first thing was religious experience. The second thing is theology. So icons are not art, so to speak. They're not there they're there to convey ideas. Okay, so in most of the church's history, people learned about the faith through images. Okay, until the invention of the printing press, and the reformers came along and said, no, actually, that's lazy and it leads to bad ideas. We need to go back to the book. Okay, so then you have the thing. The interesting thing about the reformers is they didn't like images, but they loved books. So most of the images that they preserved were images that were found in books, because they couldn't destroy books. So it's quite interesting. Okay, so there's a long history of images used, and this is a bit more of the sort of theology. So in the church, there's always been a slightly uneasy relationship with the use of images, and the reason for that is because it comes out of a pagan. There's a pagan backdrop to the use of images and this sort of sensual sort of depictions and so forth. So there's nervousness about it. Anyway, for the first, I don't know, the first few hundred years of the church, there's a very sort of uneasy relationship. And eventually this all comes to a crescendo in the 8th century. And it's the final council, it's the 7th council, the Second Council of Nicaea, where all the church, these councils are where all the church send all their bigwigs and so forth all together, okay? And they all sit down and they all decide what's, and the upshot of the Council of Nicaea too was that God assumes an image himself in the person of Jesus Christ. Therefore, it is okay for us to depict him and Christianity because of that first incarnation. And this links us back to why the elements in iconography should be natural, because the icon represents the elements of creation. So there's sort of, you've got the metallic, yeah, you've got the wood, okay, so earth, mineral. You've also got the pigments, which are natural. Yeah. You've got, what I didn't tell you about was how you mix the paint. So the way you mix the paint is you use eggs, and it's called tempera. Again, will tell me if I've got that wrong. The reason I say that, tempera, so you basically make it up, and it's a mixture of egg yolk, I use vodka, and distilled water. And the fresher the eggs, the better the tempera. Okay. And you put your pigment in a tray, you put a little drop of tempera in, you mix it up, and that's, so the yolk symbolizes life. Okay. So animal, vegetable, mineral. So the whole the theology of the icon is it's all the elements of creation are gathered into to make the image. Okay. Now, the major difference between the sort of pagan use of images and the Christian use of icons is because we see them as windows. So they're not anything to be worshipped in themselves. Okay. That would break the second commandment. But rather they become image. The way I look at an icon is a bit like this. It's a bit like you carry a photograph of your loved ones in your wallet. It's not them, but it reminds you of them. Yeah. So it's a way in which you can connect with them at a distance. And I kind of look at the icon in pretty much the same way, that it's a mode of desiring to see the divine. Yeah. So the whole journey of the Christian life is to stand and see God. And this is very much a theme, particularly within the Gospel of John, to see. And it's a bit like we've just had Easter, the resurrection. Well, the resurrection is a seeing of Jesus risen, and it's a seeing in which all humanity, all Christians, desire to see that vision. So the whole journey of life ends in this, beholding the vision of God. Okay, seeing Jesus. That's the whole desire of the Christian life, is to see, because to see is to know, or to have. So there's that. So the icon kind of captures that kind of desire to want to see and be there. And I think that takes me back to my initial experience of icons, is that in a sense, it kind of communicated to me, connected with my desire to see God, and my continuing desire to see God as I am, to stand before God, probably kneeling or lying down as I was before the icon, because the presence of God is an all-consuming event. But still, it's what we desire, because it is in the presence of God we find the fullness of what we are. So for me, the icon is a way of seeing, or it's an expression of desire. Okay, the desire to see God, the desire to be with God, the desire to be in His presence. So on a personal level, that's what the icon does for me. Yeah. So, any questions while I drink my tea? I think I will have to do a workshop because yeah, I mean, to be honest, I mean, I kind of struggled with the whole idea of images and all that to start with. And I don't think it, and if God hadn't been the one to remove that, I don't think I could have. So my anxiety about images was removed by God. But it came with a kind of understanding that the image isn't God. And which is interesting because, you know, like I say, I go to Walsingham every year, and you get the protesters there from Northern Ireland who have a very particular view of how things should be. And they often shout, oh, you're worshipping a doll. And it's a statement that actually encapsulates their misunderstanding of what is happening. People are not worshipping a doll, but they're being reminded of the incarnation. That's the central feature of devotion, and that's the true purpose of images. They don't. Your devotion doesn't rest in the image. It kind of rests through the image to the transcendence. Why is Jesus portrayed as a mini adult? Now, that is a brilliant question, and there is a reason for this, which makes Jesus often look slightly alien. I can't remember now, but there is a reason for that. I don't know. It's in the book. I'll have to look, but there is a reason for it, but not one that springs to mind. I will resist the temptation to fudge an answer because I don't know, but I know that there is a reason. Ask me again once I've read the book again. Yeah. yeah, that's right. Yeah. So ultimately, for me, it's about devotion. The other thing that I just want to mention is most of my work in life, I work with my hands, believe it or not. Yeah, but to be honest, Gid, there's so much that I have forgotten, but it won't take me long to get it back once I get into it. However, what was I saying? I can't remember now. No, it's gone. It'll be back in a minute. Okay. Yeah. Unless you want to remind me. No. Yeah. So yeah, the whole thing. Oh yeah, work with hands. So I work with my hands. So when I actually became a vicar, I kind of missed seeing what I'd done. So like I'd spend all day doing stuff, and at the end of it, I'd look around and I couldn't see anything that I'd done. So like before, I worked on well, I say air conditioning is, but they were compressed air dryers. So compressed. So what they used to refrigerate air for air tools. That was the engineering that I worked on. And at the end of the day, I could see what I'd done. I used to build these sort of units and wire them up and charge them and put, you know, refrigerant in them, and then I used to set them up and run them. So I did the whole thing from start to finish. I used to make the whole thing, and so I could see what I did. And when I became vicar, I struggled with the idea of not actually not seeing what it was that I'd done. It was a kind of psychological thing. And the other thing, the thing about the icons that really fed me was it kind of was a way of working with my hands again and producing something that I could see. But again, that ties into the whole idea of seeing, you know, yeah, that desire to see, and that desire that in the end, we will see what we now don't see. So that sort of fed into that kind of thing. So I hope that at the end of my life, when I die, it would be nice to think that I will be able to finally see everything that I've done, and I'll probably get to see all the things that I shouldn't have done and didn't do as well. So, but there you go. But I think that desire to see is a kind of important thing for me. Yeah. And I've talked for an hour. It's a good job I don't work with my hands anymore, because or maybe I should give my mouth a rest. You'll not be gilding my coffin. No, I don't want a gilded coffin. You can't see it, can you? I always thought that was, I mean, you know, Michael Jackson was buried in a gold lined coffin. I don't get that. Oh, no. There you go. So I will do something. Hopefully, we might be able to do something. The only thing is as I think if I did a workshop on it, it's a long day. I don't know. I think there's too much to do. I mean, really, actually, if you go and do, Peter Murphy normally comes every year or every other year, I can't remember now, to do a workshop at the cathedral. Then the next time he's down, I'll advertise it and we'll all go and do an icon, because he's got all the kit and it's a 2-day thing. And I know it sounds like 2 days, but there's so much. I mean, the 2 long days as well. But I'll do a day and just do some basics. But the good thing, if you do a course with, was it 2 days? Not sure if it was 2 days or if it was a week. I can't remember. But if you do a course with Peter, you get to, he provides all the equipment and everything, and at the end of it, you get to take an icon home. So that's really good. And I think the course was about £200, which is not bad. And the other thing is the other interesting thing is I'm no artist, okay, and I don't claim to be. I just like making them. And if you look at the icon close enough, you'll see that I'm not an artist. And so actually, wherever you are, everybody can make one. And that's the brilliant thing about icons, is actually you don't have to be that skilled to do it. The hardest thing is the gold work. The gold work is really tricky. But I think if I did a course in the church, which I could do, in fact, the more I think about it, the more I like the idea. No, I don't consider myself an artist. Yeah, it'd be a day's course, and yeah, and everybody. I've got some boards that I bought. Loads. I've got all my stuff is scattered all over the place. I don't know where they are. I bought some boards for people to practice for me to practice on. So little boards. You can get like a pack of 10 for, I can't remember, and they're already pre-jezzoed and everything. So yeah, well, we could, but not in the winter. Geraldine says if we got rid of the pews from the side aisles, we could have a residential course. Pews, wonderful things. Okay, well, we won't do pews today. But yeah. So has anybody got any other questions or anything? All right, okay. Yeah. But the one thing I've discovered in life is if you put your mind to something, if you have that desire in you and you cultivate that desire, you can pretty much do anything you want in life. That's been my experience. And I would say that actually the architect of all of my good desires has been God. And whenever I've cultivated what God has given me, it's always borne out. I find that. So from making icons to not knowing anything about making icons to making icons, or whatever it is in my life, whenever I've followed my desires, my God-given desire that He places in your heart, then you can do it. And so, which leads me back to the beginning of the story. That desire to see and to know is kind of very much at the center of my spiritual life, really. Yeah. So the other thing I just want to say about images, and you know, I like the bling, and I like ritual, and I like all that, because I'm always thinking, and actually in worship, ritual replaces words for me. I don't want to think about it. I don't want words. I want other things to speak. I want God to speak through other things. So in that sense, for me, ritual becomes the words through which God speaks. So I'm quite a wordy person. I like literature, like words, like all that. But in worship, it's the other side. I'm trying to sort of discover the desire, and to sort of see God in the rawness. And once you put it into words, I find words are never enough for the word of God. You know, so that's what I like anyway. Anyway, 4 minutes past the hour, and let's say the grace. So the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all evermore. Amen. Thank you very much, and yeah, see you soon. See you Sunday. Bye-bye.